Hello, today is Tuesday, October 24th, 2017, and I just wanted to share something that was kind of on my heart today. I was listening to a podcast about coincidences and, you know, why some things happen and as my notes fall down. So I wanted to tell you, as Halloween's approaching, I wanted to kind of tell you a little story about my favorite Halloween. See, it was October 31st, 2010, when Crystal and I found out that we were having a little girl. We found out about Samantha on a day where most of the country is celebrating Halloween and celebrating, death. We got to celebrate life. So what are the odds? Well, I mean, there's 365 days in a year, so I guess the odds are 1 in 365. 3 days later, tragically, we found out that Crystal's uncle Mike died. Just a really tough time for all of us, and especially her family and her dad, who was really really close with his brother. So it's just really tough. A real sorrowful week that because of the news of Samantha, we got to share and kind of put some joy into a week that would have been just really, really sad. So even from the beginning, Sammy's always brought joy to other people, and it's just a blessing. But again, so what are the odds, right? Well, we had been trying to get pregnant for over 6 years, but we'll say 6 years. What are the odds that we find out about Samantha the same week that Uncle Mike dies? So just what are the odds? 6 years. 52 weeks a year. Let's make it 1 in 312 that happened the same exact week. As we're going through the pregnancy, we found out that Samantha had an issue with her umbilical cord. It's called a two-vessel cord instead of a three-vessel. So normally, an umbilical cord has one artery and two veins, but Sammy had just one of each. And it happens about 1 in 100. So again, what are the odds? So about 1 in 100. It depends. You can do research. Some places say 1 in 100. Some places say 1 in 500. But the numbers, we'll go with 1 in 100. We'll be very conservative. The next part of this story was the fact that we were in Dallas. So I don't know, about June, the beginning of June, we found out that Sammy had esophageal atresia, which we wouldn't have known if it weren't for the two-vessel cord. So because of the two-vessel cord, we were doing ultrasounds every single week. And because of that, we discovered her esophageal atresia in about week 36. So with that being said, being in Dallas, and what are the odds of us being in Dallas? But in Dallas, Dr. Jim Miller was there. He's probably one of the three best surgeons in the world for correcting this kind of birth defect. So again, you go to what are the odds? And, we were in Dallas because the relocation for my job. The company had moved to Arlington, Texas. They had looked at several other cities, but we landed there. So really no way to even figure out the odds there. It was just weird. I'd never lived in Texas before outside of basic training and tech school. But there we are. We find ourselves in Dallas, where Dr. Miller is, so he could take care of Sammy's birth defects. And then just add on to what are the odds. So we put our house up for sale in Texas. So we made a decision to go back to Orlando after she got out of the hospital. And the first people that looked at our house bought the house. Again, and then we happened to find a one-bedroom furnished apartment like 5 minutes away from Sammy's hospital in Fort Worth, so that we could be close to her, so we didn't have that 40-minute drive back and forth to the hospital. We could be right next door. So again, how do you figure the odds in that? I mean, lots of times houses sell the first day, not that uncommon. So we'll be really generous. We'll put the odds at 1 in 50. And then, so we still had the house in Orlando. We didn't sell it, and we had renters in there. So here's kind of the cool part about the house in Orlando. The day, well, Sammy gets out of NICU. She spends 90 days in NICU, and that's a whole nother podcast, right? So the day that she gets out, or the week that she gets out of ICU, and we finally get to bring her home, is the exact same week that the lease expires for the people that are living in our Orlando house. Again, so I mean, how cool is that, right? So the exact same week. So what, 1 in 52, right? We'll throw that number out there. And then as we're talking to Dr. Miller, we're like, well, we'll go back. We have to move back to Orlando for financial reasons. Our house is there, and Crystal's job is there, and I'm going to stay home and take care of Sam. But I'll fly Sam to Texas to do the follow-up surgeries. And Dr. Miller's like, there's no need to do that. There's some really good, there's a couple really good surgeons in Orlando that could do that. Let me give you their names. And then of those names, one of the two names he gave us, one of them is somebody that we had met 5 years earlier at a charity bowling tournament. Now you can say, well, you're bowlers. It's not that unusual. But how cool is that? 5 years before this point, we met Dr. Chayet at like I said, a charity bowling tournament. And again, you say, well, that's not that big of a deal. But it's the first charity bowling tournament I'd ever been a part of. And we happened to meet Sammy's future surgeon. So again, I mean, you can't calculate the odds on that. It's just really, really cool, right? And then just final kind of wrap up, as Sammy's going to school now, kindergarten last year, and she's in first grade now. Her school nurse, now because of Sammy's issues, she has some problem, some issues that she's dealing with, and she visits the clinic every now and then, and needs some help from the nurse. And it just happens, like coincidentally, that the nurse at her school is a good friend of ours from church. So again, I mean, there might be a couple nurses in our church that are school nurses in our church. I don't know if there's more than one or not. There's 100 elementary schools in Orlando. So again, I mean, just all these things kind of come together as what some people would call coincidences. I mean, so here's the deal. So what are the odds? What are the odds that all of these things, this list of things that I just went over, that they would all happen at exactly the right time, for all the pieces to fit in exactly the right time? Well, I would argue that the odds are 100%, because it was meant to happen. You see, some people see all these things as coincidences, and I just don't. I see them as God. It's just a God thing, and I don't know how to explain it any other way. But in all of these things, I've seen God over the last 6 years just really make a difference and show Himself to Crystal and I, and just through Sammy and through the experiences, everything that we've been through over the last 6 years. It's just amazing. But what I really want to share with you is, if you're not looking for God, it's easy to just, that's just a coincidence, or that's just that. It's easy to ignore it. It's easy to miss Him if you're not looking for Him. And I just want to share two things with you. First of all, and kind of along those lines, if you're not looking for Him, you won't see Him. In the book of John, in the first chapter, John the Baptist shouts out as Jesus is walking by, right? So you got all these people around, and God is walking. Jesus is walking right by them, and they don't see Him. John the Baptist yells out, "Look, the Lamb of God!" I mean, he actually has to point Jesus out, or they would have missed Him. And then I want to read. This is kind of a cool passage. I love John chapter 2, where everybody's heard about where Jesus turns the water into wine, right? But what I wanted to share with you is how, if you're not looking for God, you're going to miss Him. So the master of the banquet, right, is maybe the wedding planner of today. So let me read this to you. It's in chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. And I'll be real short here. He said, so this is after Jesus turned the water into wine. And Jesus says, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then He being the master of the banquet, the wedding planner. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out their choice wine first, and then the much cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best for now." So Jesus was there. God was there in the room, and the master of the banquet missed it. He didn't see him. So I think we just we've got to be looking for him to see him. Um, and and I'll wrap up with this, but this is kind of a really cool, and I think maybe the best way to say it. Albert Einstein once said, "Coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous." So look for God out there. He's there, and He wants you to find Him, but He wants you to look. Have a great day.